Hello, and welcome to the How2Exit podcast, where we introduce you to a world of small to medium business acquisitions and mergers. We interview business owners, industry leaders, authors, mentors, and other influencers with the sole intent to share with you what it looks like to buy or sell a business. Let's get rolling. Hello, and welcome to the How2Exit podcast. Today I'm here with Blake Hutchison. Blake is the CEO of Flippa, and which is the largest marketplace to buy and sell online businesses. Flippa empowers individuals and companies to take control, take ownership, and thrive in this new small business economy. Welcome, Blake, and thank you for having you on the show. It's funny is I have a really good friend whose last name is Hutchison.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry, Ron. Thank you so much for having me. Everyone gets my name wrong. Most people will put an N in the middle or even leave off the last couple of letters.
I think that's what I did. I think I threw an N in the middle. I think it said Hutchinson.
Yeah, that's
So,
right. That's very common.
yeah, that's okay. People call me skeleton all the time, and I just smile and nod, and I haven't been that skinny in a long, long time. Thank you for being here. Everybody kind of probably knows who you are. You're the CEO of Flippa, and all of us in the acquisition entrepreneur space, we crawl through there on a regular basis. Let's just start with your origin story. How did how did you go from a little boy in Australia, of all places, which I think it's 10:30, 11 o'clock your time there?
Yeah, that's right.
How did you go from a little boy in Australia growing up there and moving around to ended up on a mergers and acquisitions show?
Yeah, it's that's a super interesting question. I often ask myself that. How did I end up becoming the CEO of Flippa? But ultimately, we all find mysterious ways to find our path, don't we, to where we end up? And for me, it was very much just about exploring different business development or growth roles in different technology companies, to the extent that I found myself often working for founders and helping them out with growth. And so I did that across the US, across multiple businesses, startups, and more established companies. I've done that in Australia with cloud accounting software companies and online travel businesses. And you know how it happens. People start to sort of see you as a guy who can grow their business. And Flippa was just that. So it wasn't necessarily that I targeted M&A or I targeted small business acquisitions or online business marketplaces. It was more that I was recognized as being someone who could grow a business with a big vision, and as a result found myself in the space. And I must say it's interesting because I've always empathized with small business owners because I was one. I had my own online business, and ultimately I wasn't successful in my endeavor, but I tried to sell that on Flippa. And so when I was tapped on the shoulder to have a look at the Flippa marketplace and to grow it into what it is today, I obviously knew what it was because I was a customer, and sometimes that counts for a lot.
It's interesting how I got into this space. I was in the real estate space and doing a real estate investment group, and I hired a performance coach. And after a few sessions, he's like, "Man, you really should be playing a bigger game." And I would close a house or find, we would do a deal or something. I close the house, and the wire transfer would be nice for our little business, right? It'd be. I think the biggest one was like 40 something thousand, $44,000. In the back of my head, I still had that performance coach, but you should be playing a bigger game.
Yeah.
And I used to, before Flippa was around, I used to flip websites. I was a domainer. I didn't know, just say I had a big enough account at GoDaddy. I had a personal assistant that worked at GoDaddy for me, right? I could
Wow.
call him
Yeah.
day or night. I had my own person accountant there. I was, stroking $30,000 or $40,000 worth of domain renewal checks a year to them. And, but I would buy websites, fix them up, and sell them. And before Flippa came around, we used to use like warrior forums, like these forums,
Yep.
um,
I know
uh,
them.
chat online, browser based chat groups or whatever, and we would post our stuff. And some kids got on there, and basically they falsified a couple of deals that I had bought, and it was just real. I realized it's just so easy to fake financials and that type of stuff that
Yeah.
I stopped doing it and went and did something else. And I see on here you guys do a lot of work towards checking things and checking traffic and verifying that stuff. You took a lot of the risk out of that. Um, Tell me a little bit about Flippa and kind of the product evolution. Like I'm sure when you got on here, not I mean, I even since I've started looking at it again, I just noticed stuff today that you got services in here I never knew you did, due diligence, legal, and all that. So, what is the kind
Yeah.
of? progression you guys are
Well,
going through?
part of the evolution is as a result of some of the things that you've just gone through, right? It's easy to fake things, and it's an industry which is so new to so many people that you've got to make sure that you build safety into your marketplace first and foremost. And that's not that different to other marketplaces, right? Like Airbnb or an eBay or an Uber, where you're always striving to ensure that they're trusted, that they're places of integrity, and that you can get business done with each other or get a transaction done with each other in a safe and secure manner. And so Flipper's worked really, really hard on that. And so there's a couple of things that we do in the product which are really close to our heart and critical. One relates to our human-based verification team. So we've got a team of 12 who all they do all day, every day is verify assets. So they look at revenue data, they look at operational data, they look at the history of the individual, they map that individual to other assets that they've historically owned and make sure that it's all credible. And then we also have what we call our verification at the source product, which is 9 different technology platforms which are connected to Flippa that you can connect to expose your data. And that's been a great evolution of our platform over the last 3 years. And we're busily building the next suite of integrations to make that even easier. And of course, it helps both parties, right? Because we're doing it for trust and integrity and helping buyers assess a deal, but it also helps with sellers because most sellers have no idea how to sell a business. Most small business owners are busily running a business, growing a business, and we've got to make their job really easy. So one of the benefits of connecting to something like a Stripe or a Shopify or a WooCommerce or a Google Analytics is that Flippa understands the metrics that matter in any given business model. And that's how we derive valuations and price guidance and things like that. So if we can make that available to you, it tends to be easier to list. Some of the other features and services, you've alluded to them. So we now have a due diligence team. You can tap into that team anytime you want. It is a fee for service. So it's a team of accountants and analysts who are on hand, typically used for bigger deals, typically used for 100K plus deals, all the way up to sort of $50 million deals. Less common in cheaper stuff, but it's there for people to use. We've also got legal, so we've got embedded letters of intent, just making that friction that is usually part of M&A and out of reach for so many people, we make it more palatable and easier to use.
It's interesting, the process. Like, I look at a lot of brick and mortar companies, and the process, you have to train the user or the seller on the process, and a lot of times you're talking to them. If they're not represented by a broker, you ask questions like, well, do you want to sign an NDA? And they're
Yeah.
like, well, what is that? You have to explain it what it is. And once you explain what it is, like, yeah, we probably ought to have one. And then you send yours over, right? I like that a lot of that is just built in. Like, I was just telling you before the show started, is I hadn't looked on the site in a while, and I had made an offer off of your site a while back, and somebody just beat me to it a day or two beforehand. It actually happened to be a business I know. It's the weirdest thing. I searched one day on here for a real estate related business, and I kind of looked at it, it's like, I know that website, I know those people, so I want it. So I talked to her, and somebody got it right before I did. But you know, I was looking at another listing on here, and I go to click on it. It's like, click here to do your NDA. And I was
Yeah.
thinking, normally that, in the process I normally go through, we've had a conversation, we've got the basics. I know I like this guy. He's in, to work with. He knows he likes me. And then I
Mm,
suggest, do you think we need a non-disclosure? Would that make you feel
mm,
more comfortable? And then after explaining what it is, I send them mine over, which is very
yeah.
generic. It protects them, protects me, and we go forward. I see a lot of that process by having it online. It streamlines that, right? I mean, it looks like
Yeah.
you go. There's even a whole section in there, how to sell a business. So you guys have taken a lot of that process and integrated it into something that people can do a step by step.
Yeah, that's right. And it's a really important piece because a lot of people don't necessarily know what a non disclosure agreement is for. What are you actually protecting, right? So if you expose your financial data, that's not necessarily confidential information. It's that the financial data is inextricably connected to the business and the business name. Then it starts to become confidential. You want to just give small business owners choice. So at the moment, when you list on Flippa, you can choose to either sell yourself or list with a broker. So that's flexibility and choice. You can protect your listing by way of a non disclosure agreement or not. And you can also choose for assets valued in excess of $250,000, so $250,000. You can also choose to only talk with people who have got a verified funds balance. So we'll actually plug into their bank account using Plaid and check that they have the capacity to pay. And so it's just about giving sellers choice around the protective measures that they think they want to take. It's not necessarily the right thing necessarily to do, but you want to give them the choice.
So, what's the largest deal that you know has closed on Flippa?
Um, Up to about $40 million. Last month, there was $35 million app sale.
Hmm.
Uh, so, certainly some bigger deals happen on Flipper. Biggest deal would be around $40 million, but most recent big deal was 35 million.
So that's a pretty good range. So I see things on here for just a few thousand, maybe even less. I'm not. I'm
Right.
just scrolling through, but
Yep.
all the way up to their bigger deals. Now, is that just recently, like in the last couple of years, you got some really big deals, or has that been peppered throughout the whole process?
Yeah, I mean, Flipper's always, I guess, been recognized for smaller deals, but interestingly enough, there's always been bigger deals in there. It's just that, there've been fewer than there have smaller deals available. And that's just because, remember, Flipper's not a broker. We have over 35 third party brokers operating on our platform. But as a marketplace, we have the benefit of scale, and so we are price agnostic. You can sell for something, as you just said, a couple of $1,000 all the way up to something a lot bigger, tens of millions of dollars. And we're able to do that with our platform. Whereas a broker couldn't necessarily do it, not because they're not good at it, they're amazing at it. It's just that they don't have the luxury of technology behind them that enables that to happen. Certainly, more recently, we've seen lots of bigger deals, and I'm talking about far more deals in excess of $1 million happening on our platform. Is that Flipper or is that the industry as a whole? It's hard to kind of say. The reality is digital businesses today are more mature, aren't they? Right. So the average age of an asset on Flipper now is 4.5 years old, whereas Flipper started 13 years ago. We were way before our time. 13 years ago, when you're trying to sell a website, there's actually very few established websites globally. Um, there's clearly some unicorns and a few that came out of the .com bust and boom and then bust, but most sites would be small. Whereas today, a $10 million website, it's actually not that hard to imagine.
Yeah, we were picking up websites that kind of look like '80s websites and turn them into websites that look like '90s websites, right? Because now they didn't have
Yeah,
all the stuff we have now.
there's still some of those available. It's great when we see them come on Flipper. We love them actually because they're so dated from a UI standpoint, but they're beautifully optimized from a revenue standpoint. They've learned how to optimize every page view so well over so long, and good buyers can sniff those out. And they'll quickly optimize them. A few additional ads on any given page, a better design, better user experience, and away they go.
I wouldn't even begin to understand what's out there now. I remember putting on cool little things like click path analysis and different types of analytics. And now when I get into my Google Analytics, it just does a lot of the stuff that we had to put very specialized tools into the websites to make work. It just does it. So yeah, it's changed a lot. Tell me
We
a
see
little bit.
some really cool businesses, Ron, come on our platform. We had a business from Queens, New York, that was a shop front selling arts and crafts 60 years ago. And back in the 90s, converted to, in the early 2000s, moved to digital just with a brochure website. And then around 2010, became e commerce and actually stopped their brick and mortar family business out of Queens and moved to digital exclusively. And so it's quite incredible when you see those stories of businesses that are generational.
Yeah, that's kind of in the realm I'd like to be in. I think I'm looking for the brick and mortar that you turn into a software company that I can, or bring into that software company spectrum and make enough of a software company that we use their multiples, right? So
Yeah,
if you take a brick and mortar company And typically, you can buy those at anywhere, depending on how well they're performing, between 1x, which is really low, to about 3.5x their profits, right? And you take that online, make it a website, turn it into an e-commerce store, and it's not unheard of to get, two, three times that, four times that, 10 times that. I've seen
Yeah.
some stuff on some of these websites where they're like, I think they're insane. Like they want, most of yours are pretty reasonable, 2.5, 2.9. I'm looking at the different multiples they're asking for. Here's a 5.2. But
Yeah.
I've seen some of these websites where they're asking for a 15 multiple or something. You're
That's
like,
right. That's right. Yeah.
software as a service is kind of like that. Now the industry's going through a little bit of a shakeup. Have you seen
Stories.
much of that as far as like, there's a lot of stuff in the news in the last 7 to 10 days
That's right.
on, tech taking a hit.
Yeah, that's a great question, and I don't know the answer. I'm wondering it myself. And so, there's a couple of things that could play out here. One, buyers. So small business is a little bit different, right? You're not getting the heady multiples that a fast growth tech business gets because the scale opportunity isn't there. They typically don't have the track record of you know year on year triple digit growth. So there's lots of different things about the DNA of small business which is different to public market multiples and even startup multiples. But regardless, I have one where the buyers tend to be more sophisticated than sellers. They've got a history of doing this, and I wonder whether they use the public market's news and knowledge as a means to compress valuations, even of small businesses, whether it's warranted or not.
Right.
Um, because they'll have the knowledge, whereas as an online business owner selling their e-commerce business that they've been running, hard for the last 3 to 5 years may not have that understanding of the public markets. I don't actually think the value of a small business changes through a recession. Frankly, I think that um, people will continue to read content, therefore blogs will still have relevance, and there'll always be advertisers. While some may not be as cashed up as they may have been historically, they'll get substituted with whoever's having a good time of it. And in any given recession, there tends to be someone who comes from behind and starts to excel, while those at the top start to compress a little bit. I just don't know, Ron. It's hard to know. I mean, clearly there's blood on the streets right now. The last 24 hours was a really sad day, and uh, there's no doubt more to come. But I just don't think small business tends to be resilient, and it tends to be immune from some of these things.
You guys, Flippa might actually benefit in one way. If you look at what's going on, a lot of times what that scares is the venture capitalists, and the angel investors. They start looking for a little more secure places to put their money. And when they take it off the market, or if they take it off the VC table or the angel investment table, the funding for some of these little startups dries up, and they have a choice. Either they come out of pocket and start asking friends and family again, or they put it up for the market and sell it at what it's currently worth. So I think a lot of stuff will come on the market just because, they're what they're trained to reach out to and get as a source of funds is going to dry up for a little while.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm not saying there's not more money out there. There's crazy money out there. To have small business owners change their conversation of not only who they're or what they're asking for, but who they're asking it from.
Yeah.
Um, is
Yeah.
less likely of a path they'll take than it is like, oh no, we don't,
Yeah.
our funding guys left, we need to sell. So there,
Mm.
I would be surprised if there's not a lot of listings in that
Yeah.
startup
So,
phase.
so, what a lot of companies do on Flipper, and I'm talking about the buyers right now. What a lot of companies do on Flipper is their strategy is to grow inorganically, right? So you pay Facebook, you pay Google, you run the SEO play, you hire salespeople. All these types of things are tactical. They're tough to get mass scale from, and they're expensive, right?
Yeah.
You can acquire a small business on Flipper, and you can actually get inorganic growth. You pay, as you just said before, 2.5 times, maybe up to 5 times multiple, but you're acquiring customers who are engaged in the niche or the category that you are interested in. you're adding revenue to your bottom line, but you're also adding customer acquisition on day zero, which is what most companies look to do on Flipper. And I imagine more companies will look to do that now that there's um, some pressure as to where that money can land.
So somebody asked me the other day, "Are you going to change strategies now the market's crashing?" I was like, "No, everything's going on sale." Right? Now's when a great time for us to look around. Everything, things will pop up for sale that wouldn't be for sale before, and the things that are already. If somebody's trying to retire and they feel a little more pressure, I think more things will close during a down economy than during a steady or inclining economy, just because the fear of uncertainty, right?
Mm-hmm.
The business owner sitting on this right now doesn't know what the economies look like. It looks like it's getting worse. They're thinking they want to close now before it gets much worse.
Yeah,
Um, to whereas everything's steadily and climbing up at the last second, if they get that seller's remorse where they don't want to like sell at the last second because they don't know what they're going to do next, then if the economy's going great and it's like, I'll sell more I'm going to do it one more year, it'll sell for more next year.
yeah,
So
it's a good point.
yeah.
It's a good point. Yeah, we may see some supply come to the platform. It's always an interesting question we get around, do you have more buyers or sellers? And there are so many buyers, it is unbelievable. There is a lot of dry powder out there.
There is absolutely. It shows right now you have over 6,000 listings though. So I'll admit I probably need to crawl through here more often. I was just prepping for your show. I was looking through here. I was telling you earlier, like, wait a second, there's a podcast company on here that does podcast guest. They acquire guests for podcasts, but
Yeah,
if I would be that would be a good idea to monetize that. So I'm going to reach out and talk to those guys. But if you think about it, I have a production crew, and I have a crew that goes out and introduces me to people I want on the show. What if I hired a production company that's already making revenue, and I hire a guest getting service that's already got revenue? Now I've monetized that. My people go work at those with those teams and help train them to do it the way I want it done,
yeah,
and now I've got a revenue generating source that was something I spent a lot of money to maintain. So
yeah.
I'm
It's a
sure
great
other
way.
I bet you get a lot of entrepreneurs that way. I think if people crawl through here, if you're an acquisition entrepreneur and you're not crawling through Flippa, um, like myself, probably mistaken, because there's a lot of stuff here that would bolt on, um, onto almost any industry. At 6,000 listings, I'd be amazed if I didn't find something. I bet if I'm looking at coffee roasteries right now. I bet if I search your website right now for coffee, I bet I find blogs or something for
Yeah, you
coffee.
know what? So I hope you do. But coffee and food blogs and related businesses go very quickly, and um, I think it's just because it's an evergreen niche, right? Coffee's never going anywhere. So you see a good performing coffee blog, um, people snap them up quickly.
There are 22 results in the one of my in the with the keyword coffee. So there are things to look through on here. So one of the things I always like to ask is, there's a lot of things going on in every industry. What are the myths around buying or selling digital products such as websites, blogs, and apps that are out there, if you just wish were gone?
Yeah, I mean, I guess the biggest myth is that it's passive, and um, there's almost no endeavor in the world that's truly passive. And digital can come across to the layman as being more passive than it really is. So I would say that's a big significant myth. And I encourage first timers who are listening to us today and saying, "Oh, gee, I've never heard of Flipper, but I better go there right now and buy something." You want to take the time out to learn and spend time defining the business model that you think you're most interested in and good at, because it isn't passive. You've actually got to put in the time and the labour to ensure that it runs just as well as it has historically. They call that period of time. So the sort of 120 days post acquisition they call stabilising the patient. And so it's actually not passive at all. You've got to put the effort in to ensure that it continues to run the way it was. That would be myth number one. Um, I guess myth number two would be that you have to buy within your own geography because there's scams everywhere else. And it's just not the case. Check out the verified data sources on any given listing. Obviously, conduct your due diligence. use a third party due diligence service or use Flippa's due diligence. I don't really mind which one you use. But the reality is there are great digital assets from all over the world. And we see American customers, of which it is our biggest customer base. 50% of all Flipper activity happens in the US. But savvy American buyers are buying inexpensive Southeast Asian assets and inexpensive Latin American assets and inexpensive Central Asian assets. So take a look at the rest of the world, because there's a lot of great digital businesses that you can leverage from home, staying right put where you are, while getting a good return from. So that might be myth number two. I'm not sure I can come up with a third.
That's okay. The if you look at, one of the things a lot of these acquisition entrepreneurs do is they take a company like a brick and mortar company, and they take them online. And I would venture to say that it's a lot of the gurus and a lot of guys teaching this, the acquisition entrepreneur space, they refer to bolt on. I would
Mm,
say it's almost easier to find a bolt on software company that have built a site and a product in your space, talking to the same customers. They have customers already, and
yep.
have them, you know, update it or make it work with what you've got going on, as opposed to just going out and hiring a production crew and doing it from scratch.
Yeah, that's right. And I agree with that, Ron. And the only one of the things I would add to that as well is often you can actually optimize and get return quite quickly, because interestingly enough, the people who list their websites on Flipper, on average, they own four sites. So they're actually quite, their knowledge and their labor is distributed. So if you buy a website and put a bit of time and effort into it, you can actually get pretty quick returns, because you spend the time and effort to make it right. So if you own a tattoo parlor, right? Don't ask me why I thought of that vocation. So you own a tattoo parlor, and there was an asset that was available on Flipper, and it was called Tattooing 101. And it was all about how to tattoo, and there was a bunch of different artworks and all those types of things. Whole heap of experts commenting on that occupation, that vocation. And I know for a fact that that business was bought for 5 figures and then sold for 7 figures 2.5 years later. And so you can get serious returns when you find something which has been around for a little bit, has good authority in the eyes of Google. Put a bit of effort into a redesign, and you'll prove yourself as an acquisition entrepreneur.
Sounds like a brilliant way to start too. A lot of these guys that I talk to, you know, it's interesting. They take a course or whatever, and when you sit down with them and figure out what they've done in the past, they've only ever had a job, and they're taking courses on how to buy companies with revenues of 1 million to 20 million, having never owned the responsibility of a P&L. And first thing I tell them is get your hands on something smaller for a little bit, run it,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know. And there's mixed signals on that. The gurus that say no, 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 you're buying yourself another job. When you buy something small, you really want to buy something big enough to where that you can pay and hire people to know all that stuff that you don't know. But there's something to be said about knowing enough to have your own BS meter. And maybe that's internal for me. I study a lot of things occasionally just so I know enough about it to know what I want. Like I'll study when in the real estate space, I probably knew more stuff about real estate law than my real estate attorney over the years I did it. I'm doing the same thing in the acquisition and merger space. I study that because I want to know what clauses and stuff I want in the contracts, and what should and shouldn't be in there. So when I go to another state and my favorite attorney can't operate in that state, and they I hired an attorney to produce as a document, I can read through it and go, yeah, I think you're missing X, Y, and Z. Why are we not
yep,
doing that? And
yep,
the same level of kind of a BS meter, I would say you need that in almost any business. And that's just my personal preference. But I think Flippa would be a great way to start. You can come in here and find a company that's doing six figures that has, I was glancing at one that says it's doing six figures with a 47% um, profit margin. So you're going to make on that little one. If you get a hold of it, you're going to need to run it and do some work on it. But, day one, if you run it as well as they did, you're going to make $75,000 a year,
Yeah.
and on that asset, and then you can take a look at what it means to own a P&L, like a profit and loss responsibilities
Yeah.
for a company.
I think that's a super important statement. Right now, if people want to go to my LinkedIn, I've posted a video of a gentleman, and you only have to watch the first 5 seconds. He actually says he paid for business school, and he also paid for a small website on Flippa. And the learning he got from running that site, he believes, was more effective and beneficial than his business school. Now, no doubt his tuition fees were pretty steep too. Um, so there's a lot to be said for owning and operating. You learn so much so quickly. Not only do you learn about the digital economy and the business models that are driving the world today, which is really important for everyone. Um, but as you just said, your financial aptitude increases from day one because you've got to understand your financials from day one, including a profit and loss statement.
It's interesting. You'd have saved me a little bit of money had you been around the 15 years ago before I moved here. I did that. I went to business school. I thought I was the king of the world. I have a master's degree in marketing, right? I have this MBA in marketing. I thought, well, I'm going to go out and create my own business, and I'm an entrepreneur. I know marketing now. Let's do this. So I liquidated my entire 401k and a bunch of other stuff. Dumped a lot of my own money. Let's just say high six figures, not quite seven figures, and a few hundred grand of other investors' money, and created an online dating service. And the
Oh,
lesson the lesson I learned, and this is back when Plenty of a Fish was lying about their subscriber base and a bunch of others were faking it until they make it. I named my damn business honestyfirst.com because we actually created a solution to the what they call catfishing now. I used to call it the Mr. Potato Head problem. You would
yeah,
like you'd see somebody online, you go meet with them, and like they kind of look like the person, but somebody moves some stuff around,
yeah,
right? We created a mechanism that was fairly sophisticated, but pretty much was kind of the eBay 5-star rating with some better algorithms to keep people honest in their profiles. Well, I learned some very valuable lessons. Number one, nobody wants to be honest in a dating profile, right? Number two, an MBA program teaches you absolutely nothing about bootstrap marketing a company, right?
yeah,
Makes you a great, if you have a $50 million budget and you work for Coca Cola, it makes you a great employee.
yeah,
But to sit down and actually just take something from zero users and to grow
yeah,
it, scale it, and turn it into
yeah,
a viable business, my
yeah,
MBA gave me nothing. So I ended up going out to mentors and hiring people, and it took kind of an eye opening event. Both my parents passed away within 18 months, so I took some time off from it. And as you take time away from things that people said to you along the way started setting in. I flew around pitching VCs and stuff, this business, and nothing they said to me stuck in until after I shut it down. It's like, hey, you really don't have a business here. You have a great product. You should go pitch
yeah,
Match and stuff, which I did later. And that, I won't say which one. It wasn't Match, but I pitched some of them my technology about keeping people honest in profiles, and they reopened my eyes. Like, none of our users want to do that, right? But
yeah. You
if you
thought you
go
had a
back,
great solution, but it just didn't match their commercial needs, right?
I might have been able to get at least one of the six figures out of, because we had some users, people were starting to use it, and it was just I needed funding to scale. The way I was going to scale is pick major metropolitan areas, focus my market on there, grow a following in like Dallas. Another thing about dating sites is it's a chicken and egg problem. Nobody wants to be the first lonely soul in a zip code in a dating site. And that's why I joke around and said Flippa and not Flippa, sorry, Plenty of Fish, and a lot of those other guys kind of faked it until they made it.
Yep.
Uh, a lot of their first initial profiles weren't real people, and it's been
No,
proven since
I'm
then.
sure.
So,
No
but
doubt. No doubt.
I honestly, there's a huge opportunity out there now, and there's one or two websites out there that to kind of do what you guys do, but you've dominated this. Like 6,000 active listings. It says here you've already closed or sold 265,000. Um, that's fairly impressive, and I bet if you look at the scale of things, you said you've been around for more than 10 years. That's probably ramped up quite a bit because, I'll be
Yeah.
honest, I only remember hearing about Flippa 5 or 6 years ago. So you really started getting some traction, you know,
Yep.
more recently
Yeah,
than.
so I mean, the numbers are reasonably impressive in the sense that quarter one this calendar year, there was $230 million worth of assets added to our marketplace. And this quarter, we're on track for $300 million worth of assets added to the marketplace. And so we don't, we can absolutely imagine a time where there's $1 billion worth of assets being added every quarter, and accordingly, that matches up with buyers, what buyers are looking for. We get buyers complaining because they're like, we want more choice, right? We want more deals. We have people who are trying to buy every day. They've actually told us that they would pay us to keep lots of deals behind a walled garden, so that they
Pocket
get access
listings. Yep.
first, right? And so we built a private marketplace. So there's about 50 deals behind the scenes at any given time, that are just, as they come on board, they're typically really high value, and we farm them out to institutional buyers who have a history of purchasing on Flipper.
Yep.
And so, yeah, it's a great market to be in. Small business owners deserve their time in the sun, and that's why we like to talk about ourselves in the context of, we're building the investment bank for the 99%. All of the services that people who have been in traditional M&A have gotten access to, I'm talking about the big end of town. Those services haven't been available to small businesses. So that's what Flipper is. That's what Flipper's building.
So, do you guys see any? I know when eBay came around, and anytime you get a big marketplace, you almost get a made for following, meaning that like when AdSense came out, there was a bunch of websites that were made for AdSense. They actually just created a website to try to monetize it with AdSense.
Yeah.
There's a bunch of people who they absolutely, eBay came around as a marketplace to sell your stuff, and then there are people out there that hunt down stuff and sell. I'm imagining now that on Flippa, and I bet if I dig here, I can pick some of them out. There's some websites up here that are what I would refer to as made for Flippa,
Mm-hmm.
meaning somebody went out there, they built a website, they got it up to, they maybe ran it for a year, got a couple hundred, maybe a couple thousand users on it, and they
Yeah.
post it for sale because they love creating, they love the curation process, and they create and sell. Do you have a lot of repeat sellers?
Yeah. So we do have a lot of repeat buyers and sellers. Admittedly, the made for you space isn't that big. And the reason being is, acquisition entrepreneurship expects the reason people are in that space to begin with is because they get to acquire traction. They get to acquire something where the hard yards have been done and there's an audience ready to be tapped. And so those people who are building things to be sold that are only 6 months old or 9 months old, they don't yet have the predictability of a longer duration or age asset. And so accordingly, they're less in demand than you would think. But there are some really, really savvy operators who build really, really high quality AdSense sites. And they're there and they will state that they are repeat sellers on Flipper, that they've got a history of doing it, that they're trusted, that they've got fantastic reviews, and that you can buy a site from them for $5,000 to $10,000 and you are well and truly on your way and you get a lot of benefit from their expertise. So that happens. What is probably even more interesting than that is you get repeat sellers of quite high value assets. So they've actually built, not necessarily for Flipper, but over a period of time, they've amassed a portfolio of sites. And so, much like someone who has a good quality wine collection, they eventually go and consume that wine and get rid of it. And similarly, in this case, they've recognized that this asset class, which we call digital real estate, valuations have crept up and the predictability and the quality of their asset over time is worth more and more. And so they start to sell those off. And they do that 2, 3, and 4 times. And so, buy side, there's a guy in Toronto. He's an awesome operator. COVID hit. He was meant to be retiring. Came out of retirement. He bought 9 sites. Each site's only worth, on average, $15,000 to $20,000. He's maybe spent $250,000 on the platform, but he's up 200% on his invested dollar. So you do get a lot of repeat customers. This is a long way of saying they're not necessarily always just made customers, made for Flipper customers.
I think the cool thing that protects you on that one is your buyer base tends to be more sophisticated. If you look at like eBay and the other market space, you basically just have your average, and I wouldn't, you know,
Mm.
say unsophisticated, but let's just be honest, the average human's unsophisticated. So you have your average guy that'll buy anything roaming through here, to where the people on here are looking for a producing,
Yeah,
business. They're looking for a business, not just a website. So I think I think it'll stay self-corrected so long as it appeals to sophisticated buyers. And there are other template sites and other stuff people can go if they're just looking for a template or a shell. But I was just curious if you
yeah,
guys put protection mechanisms in or anything just to keep the quality listings up higher. I noticed I can search for years. That's one of the things I like. I like well-ran companies. So in some of your filters,
yeah,
I can turn on, like, I want some. I'll show me everything. I start off like, show me everything that's been around for 5 years or more, and then I'll when there's if there's
yeah,
not much or there's not something of real great interest, I'll look, at other ones. But
yeah.
it just
So
says
in
something that if you
short, we
go
have
ahead.
a marketplace integrity team that is, ferocious in their reviews of websites, and if somebody has one bad transaction record, they're done. We have a no tolerance policy. And then in addition to that, we have, you know, what we might call internally Spidey sensors, i.e., Spider Man sensors. And we've got a bunch of different technologies that are all about protecting against, fraud and or bad actors. So it tends to be that one, Flipper's doing some hard yards. And then two, as you said, you've got a pretty sophisticated buyer base. There's three types of buyer. You've got side hustlers. They're looking to supplement their income. They're like you and I, and maybe we just want to do something on the side. You've got entrepreneurs, and they want to own and operate. And you've got company buyers. But interestingly, even when you go down to side hustlers, their average budget, so per deal budget of a side hustler, is $17,000. So whilst that might sound inexpensive to some people, that's still a fairly sophisticated customer when they've got $17,000 in um, discretionary available for Flipper. So it's a savvy buying base.
I can see that. So, what would be your top three tips for buying a digital asset? If you were like, if you were to sit down one day and like, okay, I'm going to look through something here I'd love to own and run next, what would be the top three things that you would focus in on?
Yeah. So first one would be, decide the business model that best suits your skill set. Um, if you've never even heard of what SEO, if you don't know what SEO is, don't buy a content website. If you've never run a direct to consumer business, don't buy a direct to consumer e-commerce business. If you think SaaS is sexy, but you don't understand the metrics that matter, you've never heard of you don't know how to calculate churn, you don't know what lifetime value is, you don't know what MRR means. SaaS sounds sexy to everyone, and then they typically don't know how to run a SaaS business. So, um, write down your skill sets. What are your skills? What have you developed over a lifetime of effort? And then match those skills up to the business model that makes the most sense. Tip number two would be find something you're passionate about, because, as I said, it's unlikely to be passive. So you've spent dollars, in some cases you've spent five to company. I really want to ensure that the category or niche that you're operating in is something about, because it'll most likely be that you're going to run that business for at least 2 years post acquisition. In some cases, 5 to 10. So passion is a really important part. The third thing is, never, like gambling, never actually spend more than you have. You want to also reserve some funds for optimization and getting the most out of the opportunity. So if something's earning $5,000 a month, $60,000 a year, and you're going to pay $120,000 for that, so you're paying a two times multiple. The great news is that the economics on that should give you a 50% annualized return, but they'll only give you a 50% annualized return if you continue to invest in the content and continue to invest in understanding the long tail keyword set that you operate within, or whatever it might be, depending on the business model. So have some funds reserved to continue to invest in the asset that you've just acquired, would be tip number three.
Got it. And then what about selling? If I decide I want to sell one of my online assets and I'm going to use Flippa. What are the top three things I should know before I come visit your site?
Optimize, optimize, optimize. So first and foremost, optimize revenue. So if you've got 2 ads per page right now, throw a third on there, see what it does. If it doesn't work, clearly remove it because it's impacting the user experience. But if you've got 2 ads on a page and you can add a third and eke a little bit more out of every page view, that's going to do wonders for you when you're seeking out a sale. Um, I said optimize, optimize, optimize. So the second optimize would be the user experience itself. So if you've got a crappy design, optimize that. Go onto Fiverr Pro, find a WordPress designer, find an e-commerce template designer, and have them improve it. And it's a bit like merchandising in a shop window. When you walk past Banana Republic, they've chosen those clothes for a reason. So, and the models that are wearing them. And so think about it from that context and pay someone to optimize the look and feel, because that will do wonders when it's up for sale on a Flippa type platform. And then the third thing is get your financials in order. So the first optimize was about making more revenue, but regardless of that, the last optimize is about getting your financials in order. Do you know how much money you make per month? Is that easy to account for? Is it sitting in a profit and loss statement? Do you know what your OPEX looks like? Where are you spending money? We've met $5 and $10 million business owners who literally have no idea
Well, that's very
where,
common.
where their expenses are. And so you've got to get that in order, because the first thing that a buyer says, particularly for an asset $5 to $10 million worth, of which there are lots of buyers out there, is they're going to say, can I please see minimum 2 years, sometimes 3 years worth of financials? And if you don't have that, you've actually done yourself out of a good deal. So
We
they're probably
certainly
my
start asking for discounts if you don't have it, right? It's
right.
I
That's
used
right.
to be
Yeah.
of the mindset, and you know, when I first got mentored in this, and I've only been in this space for 2.5 years now. When I first got into this space, or I say back into the space, when I first got back into the space, I was of the mindset it's a numbers game, right? So I was talking to many, many business owners, and if you didn't have your financials in order, you're out. If you didn't have, like, there was just a checklist of stuff I was looking for, and if you didn't have it, you're out. And I noticed for a long time, like, I wasn't getting conversations moving forward because nobody had this. And then I brought a gentleman on the show one day, and he's like, "Well, that's absolutely absurd. Why do you expect these people that have less than $5 million in revenue to have stuff? They're accidental entrepreneurs," is what he called them. And I was like,
Yeah.
"Well, that's a great phrase, accidental entrepreneur." And I said, "What, in your words, what does it mean?" And he was like, "Well, they knew how to create a great widget. A friend asked them for one, so they sold it to him. And
Yeah.
then somebody else had wanted one, and the next thing they knew, they were making 10,000 of those widgets and
Yeah.
selling $1 million of a year, and they're tired of doing it and they want to sell it. And the only accounting they've ever had to do is whatever the IRS needed them to have done correctly to turn in stuff. So they've never seen a P&L, or they've never seen a balance statement. They've never seen, some of the stuff you're going to ask for, other than your tax returns and bank statements." And
Yeah.
it clicked. He's right. I'm turning away a lot of businesses that are diamonds in the rough, right? And there are companies. I found one. I interviewed him recently here on the show that will take, bank statements and tax returns and what you're calling books and put it together in a format that it should be in. There for guys like me and other sophisticated buyers to look at and go, okay, well, this is a pretty good brand business. Um, I think it's 50-50 on it. I think if I went back to all those companies I told no because they didn't have good books, I think some of them would have been. I think
Yeah.
some of them would have been run better than they expected or they thought they were run,
Yeah.
and many of them were probably run subpar to where they were telling me they were at. All right, that's when somebody says that's the initial reaction you have is somebody doesn't have books is like, you're probably over exaggerating. You don't know, right? So we assume it's an over exaggeration, not an under exaggeration. So
Yeah, that's right. But the good news is today there are lots of affordable bookkeepers who can get things in order for you pretty
yeah,
quickly. And sometimes what a buyer will do, and Flipper has a new really cool feature where you can invite a bookkeeper or an advisor or a partner or a banker into the negotiation. So you're on the platform, you're talking about stuff, they're starting to share some documentation, and you just click invite user. And so what some buyers will do is they'll actually utilize their own bookkeeper or accountant, and they'll say, look, give us everything, we'll sort it out so that we can understand it, right? Um, give us access to your hosting accounts so that we can download all the invoices. Give us access to Shopify so that we can rationalize your revenue. And they'll actually end up doing the work for the seller. But that's a patient buyer. That's a buyer who's really hungry for your asset. They can see something between the weeds that looks really good, and they'll put the effort into doing it. But yeah, I mean, if for all those people listening out there, the good news is that you know the market for buyers is not drying up, regardless of what you might see on the streets and in the public markets. The market for buyers in a private setting for small businesses is likely to get hotter, in my opinion, because they'll look for safer environments, less speculative assets from which to put their money. So you've got time. Go and find a bookkeeper or an accountant. Get your stuff in order, and 6 months to 12 months from now, you've done all the hard yards and you're perfectly suited to sell.
Awesome. Well, we are at the top of the hour here. I mean, we're getting really close to the end here. One of the, I, I feel like we covered a lot of stuff, but is there anything I missed? If you stepped in my shoes and thought, man, he should have asked me this, what's something we should have talked about that I might have missed here?
People always ask me what I would buy if I actually, too busy building and running Flippa and working with our great team to do great stuff. But often people ask me what I would buy, and they think that lends some insight. Look, I don't think you can go wrong with a good quality AdSense business. We spoke about how established that business model is, and I think for those people starting out, if you do understand what good quality content looks like, if you know how to read SEMrush and assess Google Analytics, then look for small blogs that use AdSense that have positive cash that give you a positive cash flow opportunity, and that's the safest possible asset I can think of buying. I wouldn't say it's passive because I said that there's no such thing as passive. That's the safest possible asset to buy, and buy something in your passion. You'll end up waking up tomorrow morning. You'll be more inspired about your work than you've ever been. You'll go to the barbecue on Saturday and Sunday, and you'll say, "I just bought a cooking website. I love cooking, and now I've got this website. And it's all about cooking, and I've got people submitting recipes from all over the world. People get inspired by that stuff. So, yeah, that's what I would do if I was buying something.
It's interesting is I know a guy who actually had a food blog, and I like, how do you monetize it? He says the restaurants pay me to go there and review their food. And I was like,
Yeah,
you're serious? Like he goes to restaurants, he gets to eat for free, which he's a
yeah,
foodie, he loves eating,
yeah.
and they pay him to do the review, and he's like the hard part is I have to be honest with them. So there's people who have paid me for reviews. So like, I don't think you want me to post this, right?
Yeah, well, that's a great point. And the other thing people forget about is remember what Google's doing with AdSense is they're optimizing for big advertisers to place advertising dollars with them that go on the right websites. And FMCG, fast moving consumer goods, they are big advertisers. And so if you've got a recipe blog or you've got a blog where you review, food at a restaurant, you'll get um, FMCG companies advertising, and Google will place them on your website using their AdSense pixel. So it's a good category to be in.
Yeah, I like it. Well, I want to thank you for being here. Let's make sure everybody knows how to get a hold of you. Let's do a shout out. Joey, you said that Flip is great resource. He loves Flippa. Thank you, Joey. And then Tony says positive cash flow, SME digital assets, the last asset class apart from commodities that isn't losing. So thank you for being out there submitting your comments. If you guys want to reach out, if you're listening to the show, you can go straight to flippa.com. And fill out a comment thing. One of his team members probably will reach out to you and help you out in that way. Or if you have something you want to reach out, I'm gonna post up Blake's LinkedIn a thing. And for you guys listening on the podcast, it's linkedin.com/in/Blake BLAKE Hutchison HUTCHISON. And it's just the standard linkedin.com/in/his name, and you can reach out to him there. Famous last question: what can myself or my audience do for you, Blake? Man, what can we do to make you to help you out or to help Flip out? What is there anything we can do for you guys?
Listen to more podcasts like yours, I reckon, Ron. That would be a good tip for your audience, I would have thought. So, shameless plug, we've got a podcast called The Exit, and it talks to people who have successfully bought and sold businesses of high value, and you can learn a lot from their stories. So go and check out The Exit on wherever you get your good podcasts, Spotify or iTunes. And I think you learn a lot from resources like that. So go and do that.
I seen that. I watched a couple of them over the last few days. I like it, and I actually set my production crew. I said, "Hey, see these guys out here that did exits? Reach out to them. I want to interview some people that have sold a business." So I'm sure we'll
Yeah.
talk about Flippa on those shows too. So I do appreciate your time. Hang out for a few minutes after the show, and just for a couple seconds, and we'll be good to go.
Thank you, Ron.
All right, that's the show, guys. Have a great day. Hey, it's your host, Ronald Skelton. I want to thank you personally for watching the show today and invite you to call our new hotline, 918 641 4150. That's 918 641 4150. Call us and tell us about our show, ask questions, suggest a guest, or even tell me about a business you have for sale, and we'll reach back out to you. Again, that number is 918 641 4150. Call our hotline and leave us some information. Thank you. The Investors and Entrepreneurs Professional Mastermind. The Investors and Entrepreneurs Professional Mastermind combines the traditional peer-to-peer mastermind introduced first in Napoleon Hill's famous book, Think and Grow Rich, with accountability partnering, where your peers help you ensure that you set goals, take actions, and get results. If you want to scale, blow past roadblocks, and achieve success faster than you might think is possible, I suggest you take a visit over to TIEPM.com. That's TIEPM.com and check out the Investors and Entrepreneurs Professional Mastermind.